Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you are well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too, and let's crack on with today's first story. Much love, guys. Now, today's first story was emailed to me, which thank you to the people that have been emailing me the stories, by the way. I am getting around to them, I promise. And it's a neighbor-based story, so I thought, oh, let's make this Nightmare Neighbors, shall we? Some of you have been calling for it recently. The title of our OP's post just says, Life in a Seaview Estate. All right, mates. You asked for stories about nightmare neighbors, and honestly, I've got enough material from my estate to fill a bloody book. I've lived in this coastal estate for almost my entire life. Let me paint you a picture of this place. Once upon a time, this town was a proper holiday destination. People from London would come down for a weekend at the seaside, kids building sandcastles, that sort of thing. Then the fishing industry collapsed in the 80s. The big factories shut down in the 90s, and now we're what the council calls an economically challenged coastal community. What that really means is we've been left to rot while they build fancy new developments in the next town over. Most of the houses in our estate were originally holiday chalets, never meant for year-round living, but here we are. The wind comes straight off the North Sea and goes right through these walls like they're made of paper. Half the properties are owned by slumlords who haven't done repairs since Thatcher was in office. When you've got an area this poor, it brings problems. I'm not judging, I've had my own issues with drink over the years, but the combination of no jobs, crap housing, and zero opportunities means drugs and booze are everywhere. The council keeps promising regeneration, but all we get are more bedding shops and off licenses. Anyway, that's the backdrop. Now for the actual neighbor stories. First up is Mickey from 2 doors down. Mickey lost his job at the processing plant about 5 years ago and sort of gave up. His wife took the kids and Mickey turned his front garden into what he calls a reclamation yard, but what's actually just a massive pile of junk. The centerpiece is this fence he built last summer. The council had given him a warning about the state of his garden, so Mickey decided he needed to tidy up by building a fence around his junk so no one could see it. But instead of buying actual fencing, he spent 3 weeks collecting discarded pallets from behind the industrial estate. Then in a single weekend of what must have been non-stop work, fueled by what neighbors reckoned was a considerable amount of cheap lager, he constructed the most horrific barrier you've ever seen. It's not just that it's made of pallets, it's that they were all different sizes. Some still have shipping labels on them, and he's secured them together with a combination of rusty nails, bits of wire, and what appears to be old belts. The whole thing leans at a precarious angle, and whenever we get a proper storm, which is about twice a month, sections of it blow down and scatter across the street. But Mickey just goes out the next day, collects the pieces, and puts it back up exactly the same way. The council's been out 3 times to tell him it's a hazard, but they never actually do anything about it. Mickey now sits in the front room watching through the window, and if he sees anyone from the council approaching, he simply doesn't answer the door. Then there's the situation with the Thompsons' place next door to me. The Thompsons moved to Spain 2 years ago, but they couldn't sell their house in this market, so it sat empty for months. Then about a year ago, I noticed the lights on inside. Turned out some lads had broken in and were using it as a place to crash. Now, I'd normally have called the police straight away, but here's the weird bit. They were actually improving the place. I watched for a week as they fixed the broken gutter, repainted the front door, and even mowed the lawn. They were quiet, never had parties, and would politely nod if they saw me. I decided to confront them one evening, just to figure out what was going on. The ringleader, a guy called Stevie, explained they were between homes, which I took to mean homeless, and just needed somewhere to stay for a bit. They promised they weren't doing anything dodgy in there, and as a thank you for me not reporting them, they'd keep an eye on my place too. I reluctantly agreed, partly because I didn't have the heart to make them leave, and partly because the police response time around here is measured in days rather than minutes anyway. The strangest part, when they eventually moved on about 3 months later, Stevie said his uncle had offered them work up north. They left the place spotless. They'd fixed the leaky toilet, patched holes in the walls, and even left a thank you note for the Thompsons apologizing for the unauthorized tenancy. The most bizarre thing was that they'd washed all the dishes they used and neatly stacked them in the cupboards. When the Thompsons' son came to check on the place, he was confused because it was in better condition than when his parents left. I never told him about Stevie and his mates. Some things are better left unsaid. Dear me. The real nightmare neighbours, though, are the Kellys in the house at the end of our row. Dave Kelly fancies himself a businessman, but everyone knows his import/export business is just a cover for dealing. His house is like a railway station. People coming and going at all hours, staying for exactly 3 minutes then leaving. Not exactly subtle. Their house had been raided 4 times that I know of, but somehow Dave always gets away with it. The rumor is he's got an elaborate system of hiding spots that the police haven't figured out yet. The worst part isn't even the dealing, it's the drama that comes with it. Dave and his girlfriend Shelley have these epic screaming matches in the street at 3 a.m. They'll be out there hurling abuse at each other while the rest of us are trying to sleep. Then, without fail, they make up dramatically with lots of crying and declarations of undying love, usually around 4 a.m., just as everyone has managed to fall back to sleep. They've also got this massive dog, some kind of Rottweiler cross, that they never walk. The poor thing is kept in their tiny back garden and barks constantly. I've called the RSPCA twice, but nothing ever changes. Last Christmas, the Kellys outdid themselves. Dave, in what I can assume was in some kind of guilt-induced festive spirit, bought hundreds of pounds worth of outdoor Christmas decorations. We're talking massive inflatable Santas, reindeer with actual flashing noses, lights that play jingle bells on repeat, the works. Our electricity on the state is dodgy at the best of times, and sure enough, at 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, the whole circuit blew. No one had power for 36 hours, including Christmas Day. Kids couldn't play with their new toys, Christmas dinners couldn't be cooked, and the only house with any light was the Kellys, because of course, Dave had an illegal generator. The council keeps saying they're working on improving the estate, but the only recent change was when they installed a posh new sign at the entrance, which was stolen within 48 hours and later turned up as part of Mickey's pallet fence. Despite all this, there's a weird sense of community here. When old Mrs. Parsons couldn't afford to heat her house last winter, everyone on the street took turns bringing her hot meals and sitting with her for a few hours to make sure she was okay. Even Dave Kelly sent his kids over with a spare electric heater, which I strongly suspect fell off the back of a lorry. It's a strange place to live and probably sounds like hell to an outsider, but it's home. That said, if you know anyone looking to buy a slightly damp 2-bedroom house with a lovely view of Mickey's palette masterpiece, do let me know. And trust me, I've barely scratched the surface of the weirdness that is my estate. If you'd like to hear more about our little coastal area, like yourself, I got a ton of stories. Cheers. Just on the Mickey side of things, some people build absolutely amazing pallet fences. I've seen like videos of people doing it before. I knew a guy who once tried that in a warehouse that I worked at. He would take like the old pallets that were of no use, like the half broken ones, and apparently I saw a picture of it once. I mean, this guy actually nailed it together. He didn't use old belts or anything like that, but the state of this thing, you know, there's certain slats are all crooked, some of them are up, some of them are down, some of them were like this really dark blue color, which I think, I don't know, I always heard that they belonged to a certain company. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but some of that story was really bringing me back. You know, the estate that I lived on, I think it sounds like it's cared for much more than the council looks after OP's estate there, as we were right next to the city, but the amount of characters doing wild things such as like the dealing and the building random constructions, arguments at 4 a.m. in the morning, just absolutely screaming your lungs off. Yeah, I've said all that as well. I can recall being a young teen, and you know, I used to live in flats, so we lived on the bottom floor, and above us was another flat, and above us there was a family that's known for trouble, dealing, been arrested multiple times. One of those families that, you know, you just don't push. And they were screaming right outside my window, like at 3 a.m. or something, at some stupid time in the morning. I don't know what time it was, but it was a ridiculous time in the morning. There was screaming going on outside. She's effing and jeffing to the balcony above us. He's shouting back down at her, telling her to piss off and all this kind of thing. I just woke it up, and my eyes are like all blurry, and I just poked my head at the window. I can just remember her saying, "What the fuck are you looking at?" It's like, oh fuck. But yeah, absolutely wild times. And personally, I don't know about everyone else here, I love a neighbor story. So if you have more of those coastal area stories as well, I would love to hear them. But what about you guys? What's your thoughts on that one? And let's move on to another little story, which is from B Sting, who says, I had one who would play loud music all day. The same song over and over. It was, U-G-L-Y, you ain't got no alibi, you ugly. For months. He'd chuck water at my cat, open my post, yell at birds in his garden, bang on his ceiling, my floor when I watched TV, would bang on my door when I had a shower, and would loudly tell the neighbors that I had the audacity to put the washing machine on when I went out. He was a fucking nightmare, and really loud and annoying. I tried to ask him to keep the noise down a few times. He couldn't hear me knocking because of the music. Had to resort to reporting him to the council, which took months because he was a council tenant and they don't do council versus council problems, despite me being a private tenant. Anyway, he reported me for being loud and I got in more trouble than he did. He moved out on Christmas Eve. It was so good. Toby Jack says, old man next door. Lived next to him for years, then I don't know what happened. He decided he needed his TV blaring full volume all day, every day. Tried to talk to him about it, but he either wouldn't answer the door or would scream abuse at me. So I ended up having to phone the police at 2 a.m. one morning because I'd had enough. All out war from him after that. He kept me awake late at night, then set an alarm to get up at 4 a.m. and whack his radiator with a spanner, then run it along so it sounded like a train. He knew I was up at 6 a.m. for work and must have slept during the day so he could torment me at night. Ended up with him getting an ASBO. But shortly after that, he fell off a bar stool in a local pub, ended up in hospital, and never recovered properly. He died after about 3 months. Not gonna lie, that first night he was away, I sobbed with relief to get a good night's sleep. I'll never take good neighbors for granted again. The next one comes from Dust Patient, who says, a neighbor on my street decided to let off fireworks yesterday. Instead of setting them off in the evening, however, he thought it'd be a better idea to set them off at 4:20 a.m. yesterday morning. He decided to set off multiple very loud fireworks at 4 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. These things were ungodly loud. I'm over 7 or 8 doors down and they woke me up, so I can't imagine how the neighbors either side of him felt. The guy was drunker than a bridesmaid on a hen party, singing and laughing loudly to himself in between lighting over a dozen fireworks, one after the other. Someone must have called the police on him because by the time I was leaving for work at 7, there was a police car outside his house. I later found out that when the police had arrived for the noise disturbance, he got louder, aggressive, and refused to stop lighting more fireworks and was arrested. It got me thinking, I'm generally very lucky to have lovely neighbors flanking my house, even with a colourful character a couple of doors down. But I'm curious about the rest of the UK. Another one says, walking home from work to my pregnant wife, I saw blood running down the street. Got to my apartment block and there was blood running down the steps. Going up the steps, I saw there was blood all over the walls. Got to my front door and it was splattered with blood. It was even on the ceiling. I tried to open the door, but it was locked from the inside. Suddenly, the letterbox popped open and there was a pair of eyes looking up at me. The door flew open, I was grabbed and pulled inside, and the door quickly shut and locked behind me. My wife was standing in front of me looking terrified. She tells me that the guy next door we had never met was running a security business from the apartment. That day, he fired one of his employees who went home and then came back to knife his ex-boss. I don't know if he survived, but we moved right after that. And there was a little confusion in the comments below this one about whose eyes was looking through the letterbox, which I'm not sure if you have them in the US. You have mailboxes, don't you? I'm not sure if you have letterboxes, but it's basically a flap in the door that you can post mail through. But OP confirmed it was his wife's eyes that were looking through the letterbox, not the guy. The guy didn't get into the apartment and pull OP in. It was the wife. But what an absolutely terrifying situation to return to. But Irony Lace says, I lived in a townhouse style apartment before I got married. It was me and my roommate upstairs and a guy and a roommate downstairs. One of the guys had a girlfriend and a baby that was over all the time and eventually moved in, along with one of those little terrier dogs which weren't allowed to have. Cute dog, but it would poop all over the common entrance that we shared and didn't pick it up. Eventually the roommate moved out and it was just a couple, the dog and the baby. The walls were really thin and we could hear the couple screaming at each other and the baby wailing most nights. She didn't work and was there all day. So if a door accidentally slammed or you walked down the stairs too heavily, she would come out and yell that you were going to wake up the baby. The Saturday we moved out, we bumped the wall trying to carry the couch out to the truck, and she came out and screamed at all of us. We also had assigned parking, and she liked to park in our spots. It was a nice apartment, but I was glad to get out mostly due to them. I felt bad for the guy. He'd always been pleasant and seemed really embarrassed by her behavior. Mullenberry says, my parents' next door neighbors are terrible, the wife in particular. When their kids were in school, the mother would sit in the driveway at 6:30 a.m. and honk the horn until they came outside to leave for school. One day my mum asked if they could refrain from doing that. Oh hell no they can't! Honking continues, then everyone in the house decides to honk several times every time they pull out the driveway, just to be pricks. They still continue to do this years later. They accuse my mum of having a garden on their property. My parents have lived there for 25 years. Garden has been there for 25 years. They call a land surveyor who laid out the edges of their property. Sure enough, garden is 4 inches over the line. This lady goes nuts, spray paints a huge neon orange line between the yards, digs up the garden, puts a tiny fence in it, then starts storing their trash bins on the area. In the back corner of the yard. Super inconvenient if you ask me. Keep in mind that this is a neighborhood with a civic association. You're not allowed to even put up a fence without voted on permission. She accused my parents of putting dog shit in their yard. My parents don't have a dog, but this family has 3 wiener dogs that don't get walked. She stomps over to my parents' house and starts screaming. My dad dealt with her. He said she was screaming nonsense and seemed super paranoid, that my mum was plotting against them and sabotaging their house. The whole thing is weird. Don't be that guy says, my neighbor at my parents had OCD for sure. He would mow and leaf blow his yard every day. Every single day. If it rained the second it stopped, he would go out there and mow and leaf blow. He would leaf blow his roof. Then he would leaf blow his cars. Then wash his cars. Every day. He either had OCD or hated his wife. He never talked or waved to anyone either. Strange dude. The neighborhood kids did super glue a leaf to his driveway. I wish I was there to see his reaction. Edit, just to add a bit to clarify. It wasn't like this guy was obsessed with his lawn. In fact, it really wasn't all that nice. He would actually mow it every day. I've seen people always outside gardening and shit, but he just mowed and leaf blew every day. There had been the days where the blade of the lawnmower didn't even touch the grass. He would leaf blow the yard despite nothing being on the lawn. It would seriously have been faster for him to just walk over and grab the 4 or 5 leaves that would be on his yard on a given day. My family just always dealt with it. It's his yard, he has a right to do whatever he wanted on it, but my god, the sound of his leaf blower would just drone on forever. My next door neighbor blew a gasket on Sunday morning and walked over and yelled at him one day. He stopped and did his daily blow and mow in the afternoon. And Bruce says, God damn it, my eyes lit up when I saw this one, but there were already 1,100 comments. Anyway, me and some roommates had a neighbor, an old lady and her son, who was in his 40s probably. Honestly, we never did anything that we know of to initially get on their bad side. We'd always be sitting on our front porch drinking beers, and when the son would come home from work, he'd always do the same thing. He wouldn't look at us, he'd just say stuff in this creepy grumbling voice like, I'm gonna cut your dicks off. I'm gonna run you over with my car. This was just as he was walking into his house, and he'd always quickly shut the door. He called the cops on our dog for being out in the yard. Dog at large. At least 6 times. His mum was once raking leaves in her yard. She raked them into a giant pile next to the fence, then picked them up and threw them over the fence into our yard. Seriously, the same amount of effort would have put the leaves into a bag. But here comes the coup de grace. They were having a yard sale, so we thought we'd fuck with them, thinking they'd behave themselves with customers around. We sat on our porch and just watched all day. The son was getting really aggravated. He would periodically say stuff like, "What are you dipshits looking at?" To which we'd say stuff like, "What are you going to tell your mum on us?" Admittedly childish, but we were sick of this dude. Sick of hearing his shit. Sick of dealing with the cops every other week. A few hours go by, he pulls out a gun and points it at us. My buddy closest to the door ducks inside and calls the cops. Me and my other roommate are on the verge of shitting our pants, totally frozen. The 2 or 3 older ladies browsing their shitty wares are totally shocked, speechless, and petrified. He's yelling a bunch of shit I don't remember. He goes back inside in a huff. We run into the house, lock the doors, and wait for the cops. He got arrested, never saw him again. Moved the fuck out of that neighborhood ASAP. Oh my word. That could have gone so much worse. I mean, I guess the real warning was there when he's mumbling about cutting your dick off. But Local comes in with a story and says, "I remember little about direct confrontations with this lady, but my parents had a few stories to tell. There was a neighbor that everyone referred to as Betty the Bitch. She would do all sorts of shit to anyone that lived near her. She once called the cops on a guy for warming up his truck in the dead of the Wisconsin winter. He was disturbing the peace. She'd fly off the handle if she ever heard anyone use profanity. Did you leave your dog out for an hour so it can enjoy the sun? Prepare for cops to come over for the dog that's been barking non-stop for 6 hours and being neglected. Her children were not allowed to interact with those people, being anyone in the neighborhood. And then the doozy. I was maybe 5 or 6 at the time. I was having fun riding my bike up and down the street, as young children want to do. Turns out her kids were drawing with chalk all over the road. Massive span the width doodles. I rode my bike over their artwork and she flipped her shit, ran from her porch over to me and knocked me off my bike. She was screaming insults at me for ruining her children's work. One of my parents saw this shit happening and let her have it. I think she was visited by the police, but I can't be certain. She was a see you next Tuesday. And I always think, after a Nightmare Neighbor video, about how many situations go on every single day across the world with neighbor drama like this. And then it always brings me back to my youth, and I think about all the people that I met that I was younger, all the different characters that were around the area that I lived, and you know, each individual there was an archive of stories themselves. I can remember a couple of adults when we were younger who would randomly turn up with massive, like, thick black cabling, and we didn't know what it was. We never questioned it either. You know, they were adults, we were playing football, we didn't really care what they were doing. We just thought, you know, they're doing their job, whatever that was. But you'd see them, you know, splitting this big cabling open and pulling out whatever's inside of it, and then chucking all the waste into a storage and just taking off the insides of the cabling, which clearly now, looking back, they were stealing cabling from the local railways and then selling on the copper, I guess. I'm assuming it was copper. But eventually they were arrested and put away for some years because of what they were doing. Apparently, I don't know how much they stole, but it was a hell of a lot. But now I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this collection of Nightmare Neighbor stories? Do you enjoy the Nightmare Neighbor stories? I know everyone likes something different every once in a while. And of course, do you have your own Nightmare Neighbor stories? You're more than welcome to share with me directly through email, which you can find on the channel, or post them on r/Mark Narrations. It's really easy to create a throwaway account if you want to do that as well. Just search it up on Reddit. Really simple to do. But would love to see your stories for another collection of Nightmare Neighbors. But just a huge thank you for being here today, getting involved in the stories, your love, your support, your time. It always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.